not every lawyer is the best at everything. You know, there are people that are way smarter than I am. There are people that can try a case better than I can. There are people that are nicer to clients than I am. And there are people that are better at every individual piece than I am. But there are things that I can do if I stack them right that differentiate me from other lawyers. And it sounds like service and connection with people is probably one of your strengths.
Yeah. And, I think what's intimidating about being a lawyer is that you're looking at the finished product of somebody, right? You don't know what they went through. And you try so hard to overstep those, like your particular boundary, and you might fumble. But I know that I can meet someone, talk, and try to figure out stuff. And then the rest of the things that come along with a lawyer, I think, you can learn. I don't try to do more than I'm equipped to do. And yeah, that works for me.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview law firm founders and hear about their backgrounds, their stories, and lessons they've learned along the way. And today's guest is going to be a good one. He is somebody I came across on LinkedIn, and he had an interesting post. I said, man, I got to get this guy on and learn more about him and his practice. So please welcome Dwayne Pennant. He is a lawyer largely based in Charlotte, but he's got a practice in Massachusetts as well. We'll let him explain that. Dwayne, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So tell me, what kind of law do you do? What areas do you practice? And I want you to explain. You're based in Charlotte, but you have a Massachusetts presence. So I want to learn how you did that and how you spend your time between the two jurisdictions.
That's wild. Yeah. So I practice personal injury and estate planning and probate. And my plans originally, I lived in Boston and I grew up there. And I was going to go to law school there, but one of the schools I got accepted into was Charlotte School of Law. And I remember I was flying actually to go to Florida to visit one of their schools. And I had a layover in Charlotte and I missed my flight and ended up liking it here. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay here. But I always went back home to Boston. So when I became a lawyer, passed the bar, a lot of family and friends were like, hey, you're going to come back up here, you're going to have a business. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then eventually, that opportunity came. So I go back and forth between here and Boston. Mostly I'm here in Charlotte, but I try to go back there quarterly. And it's awesome because I get to go back to see family. I go back for the food. And, it's always fun. I'm always flying back here with Chinese food in my hands, and they'll stop me at the gate. I'm being so serious. And they're like, they give me a hard time. And I got to plead with them and say, hey, look, you don't understand, man. I'm going to Charlotte. There's not enough good Chinese food down there. I just want you to let me, so I love it. Did you
have to take 2 bar exams?
I did, yeah. So I didn't pass the bar my first time or second time, but I went to UBE, North Carolina did, and I passed that. And I think before that I took the New York UBE and passed that, and then I waived into DC. And my plan was just to be licensed federally because that way I can practice in whatever state federal job was available. And I ended up going to the magistrate's office and, from there took another bar exam and then waived into Boston or Mass. And then, so I took multiple exams, yeah.
I took 2 exams too. That's enough for me. I'm not taking any more.
If I can waive. What's that?
I said I might waive in, but I'm not taking another bar exam.
I think the bar exam can be very intimidating, obviously. I had some wild stories, but once I figured out what they were looking for, I was like, hey, look, I don't mind taking it again because I wanted to see how high I can get up a score. That's just my mindset. But yeah, I honestly, I wouldn't mind taking another bar exam just to see if I can get a better score. And that's kind of wild, but that's just my mindset.
Well, not for me. So, okay, I want to explore that a little bit. So you're from Massachusetts, you're from Boston. So I get it. You wanted to be in both. You go back there a lot. How do you manage? And I've looked at your LinkedIn, and you're going to, Massachusetts bar events, and you're doing stuff in Charlotte. You're pretty active out in the community, in both communities. How do you client develop in the 2 different places consistently?
Yeah, yeah. You were saying that, and the thought came to mind: service to many leads to greatness. And I don't know why that came to mind, but like when you get active in the community, wherever you are, your name's gonna spread, and you get to meet people, you get to keep your ears to the ground and figure out what's going on. And I'm active in Boston as it relates to events, but I'm also active here, and it helps balance off. It helps to bridge the gap with what kind of new trend for law works, what kind of just things that work for different lawyers. So for me, I don't have a crazy schedule. I'm not trying to be a large firm that makes a lot of money. I just want to be able to feed my family and make an impact. And that allows me to take some chances where, hey, look, I'm going to go to Boston for a week. And my wife's like, go ahead, that's fine. I'm going to go to these events so that it's not a waste of time. I'm not going there for vacation. And then when I come back, I'll try to hit up these events here in Carolina. So it works out good where it seems like I'm really active. But in all honesty, it's no different than working a 40-hour job.
Yeah. Well, I commend you on that. It would be a challenge, and I know firms that have multi offices, but usually they have different people in the different offices. But it's all you. So
Yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out to So I was able to hire a part-time employee, and I do have two 1099 paralegals that do work for me. And I think what really has helped me to take on that workload, even before having them on, was working in Mecklenburg County, one of the highest volumes in terms of courthouse. Eventually, I'll talk about how I got to the courthouse, but working there was so crazy in terms of just being busy. And I felt like, man, if I can do it here, I can do just about any other job anywhere else. So when I went on my own and I was able to control my hours and the volume, it was a relief to me. So I was like, oh, this is not bad. You know what I mean? So I don't mind taking chances and, adding on more stuff because I know that it wasn't as bad as working at some other places where you have to be there and have to do all these different things.
So let's talk about after law school. I saw this, I don't know if I saw this on LinkedIn or on your website or maybe both, just finding a job after law school and the process you went through and sort of where you ended up. I think that's a cool story I want to hear more about.
Yeah, so you watch different television shows. You think once you graduate law school, you're gonna have all these people wanting to work at your firm, or having you work at their firm. But that's not the case for me. Our school was for profit, and it was a very large school, and I think it made people not want to hire folks from our school. And my thought process was, you know what, if I can go and volunteer or work at a courthouse, I would do that. My wife at the time, well, she was working at Hot Bench. This is like a place that goes to different, like, Judge Judy show. And she'll go to different jurisdictions or courthouses and look at their shucks and find, juicy cases that they can travel up to California. And I asked her, hey, where would you go work at? And she's like, I work at Catawba County. I was like, what about, this county? She said, no. And literally, I went down there one day and just after, I didn't pass the bar and I wanted to figure out where to go. And I went down there and said, hey, look, I'm out of law school. I don't mind coming here volunteering. And, she's like, I have a lot of applicants. And one thing led to another, and she gave me a job. And I loved being there because I felt like I was still within the legal system, even though I wasn't an attorney. But I was able to see how other attorneys operate, get a feel for the clerks and, what kind of law it would look like on the other end. And eventually, I ended up in Mecklenburg County. In between that, I was doing doc review. You know what that is. That's mindless work. I don't want to disrespect, but it is sometimes very difficult work to do. I remember being there thinking to myself, you know what, this is in between Catawba. I was like, I can't be here. And I remember thinking, I'm in Charlotte. I don't want to go to Catawba because it's too far now. Let me try to get something closer. And I decided I was going to go follow the clerk wherever she went because I wanted to have her see my face in my application. And I remember telling people within my pod, I said, hey, man, I'm going to go meet the clerk. I'm going to give him my application. They were laughing at me. Yeah, I'm going to go meet Bill Gates. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. And I just left one day after work, and I'm driving to this place that she's going to be at. And sure enough, I walk in, and she's in the very back, and I sit through the entire event. And I walked out after her, and I said, hey, look, my name is Dwayne Pennant. Here's a resume. And can work for you. And she's looking at my resume, and I'm like, oh, man, this is so stupid. And I just said, hey, look, Les Brown says you got to be hungry. She looks at me, and she goes, I love Les Brown. Walk with me. And I was like, oh, my goodness, it worked. And, that feeling of just, like, not wanting to satisfy doing one thing and then taking risk, and she loved that. And she went back and told someone in their workplace, hey, pull this guy's application. And I remember telling her, if you hire me, I'll do whatever it takes to make, this courthouse look good. And that became sort of like a rule. She always saw me, and I remember telling myself, I always got to make her look good. And I was a clerk in civil department for a grant position, and I worked really hard. I mean, I would take everyone's files back. I would just do whatever work they wanted me to do. And they were like, "You're a lawyer. Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Man, you know what? You guys are the ones that make this thing go around. And I wouldn't mind learning from you guys and whatever." And she said, "Hey, look, you're working so hard. We're going to promote you to more work." And that was in the Estates Department. And that's where I kind of got a feel for what I'm doing now in probating. And I got tired of that and wanted to leave. And she was like, "Hey, I think you should stay." And I was like, "Nah, I've had enough." And an opportunity opened up as a magistrate. She's like, "I want to nominate you for this." And I was convinced I was going to take it. And my mentor said, "Take it. It's a good opportunity to learn." And I took it. And, it was just, I felt like my path was being like laid out for me, all because I wanted to go volunteer. So I just kind of ran with that.
That's inspiring. And I think for other people out there who, maybe are just starting or thinking about things, you can you said your path was laid out for you. I mean, maybe, but you also went and sort of made your path. I mean, you didn't sit back. It didn't come to you. You had to go make it happen. And I think a lot of people, even lawyers have been practicing a long time, they just sit behind their desk all the time. It's like, no, you got to get out and do stuff if you want to grow your practice, grow as a person, whatever it is. So what was it in you? Were you always like that? Where you're like, all right, I'm just going to go do these things?
Yeah, no, it's weird. My wife and I would talk about that. She's like, talk about this, how we kind of process and troubleshoot. In some ways, I think a lot of it is just, maybe upbringing. I don't know. But I was that kid that kind of like took chances. I was a troublemaker partly in high school. Got into fights here and there, but really I was a nerd just trying to fit in. And I remember I would be in the more risk-taking side, and I felt like this whole experiment of law school, it was just me trying to not satisfy with working at John Hancock and just doing 9 to 5. I wanted to do more, and I felt like, hey, look, just try the hardest thing. If you feel what's the biggest deal, you learn something new from it. So that kind of creative thinking, it showed up when I was even after I graduated from law school. I remember I would apply for jobs, and they'll send out an auto reply, and I'll reply back to that. I wanted to make sure my time. I would reply back to that. I would just do wild stuff, man. Like I said, show up where clerks were, because I wanted to distinguish myself. I didn't have the grades. All these diplomas in the back here. They're not mine. It's my wife. So I think I might have one little small one in the back here, right? So I'm not that kind of book smart guy, but I am creative. I feel like I have some level of ingenuity, and I feel like if I'm able to connect with people and I work hard, it opens the door for me. I always try to lead with a spirit of I want to learn, and I think they love that, and I think just being able to not satisfy or not settle has been helpful.
Well, the other thing about the story that I like is no matter the job, you're going above and beyond. I always tell people, and I have tried to do it myself, is you want to be known for something. You want to be good at something. You want people to say, I can rely on that person, instead of just punching the clock. You were going way above and beyond, which it sounds like eventually led to this magistrate position, which is pretty cool. If you had just been punching the clock, I don't think that position would have opened up for you. I don't know. What do you think?
100%. I remember people there were like, "You're working too hard." And part of it was, I think, coming off of studying for the bar exam and knowing how much time and energy I put into that, I just couldn't come to a job where I just sat down. And I wanted to create more friction, because I felt like friction is how you grow. And I would say, hey, look, I know you're not using that, or you're done with your pocket, take it back. And I wanted to stack and keep on stacking stuff. So yeah, I certainly don't want to settle. Even now, as I feel like things are steady. I want to push the boundary, because I feel like in my mind, it's about growth. I think if you keep growing and growing and growing, you can, lay a good track for yourself. So yeah, 100%. I don't like to settle, and I feel like you gotta go out and earn it.
And let's talk about it. So you got nominated, or did you get appointed? How did the
magistrate?
magistrate?
The way it works is that the clerk of court nominates you, and then you get appointed by the Superior District Court judge, Superior Court judge. So, it's a matter of applicants, and they're like, hey, of these people, I will nominate that person. And the reason why I was nominated was because, and she would tell me, she's like, hey, look, I have all these voicemails of people that you've helped in the Estates Department. People would stop me in the hallway and say, hey, there's a guy up there that went way above and beyond. And for me, it was just a matter of, if I can serve the people here for free, I feel like I can do it for money. But also, I was sympathetic towards people that were coming into my office or my cubicle that just lost somebody. You know what I mean? So being able to connect that way allowed her to say, hey, look, you're going to do a good job regardless of where you are. So she nominated me for that merit. And then someone, appointed me, yes.
That's cool. So you're getting, your boss is getting voicemails about you. People say, man, that's like, the best Google reviews nowadays, right?
And I didn't know that. I didn't know that until, we're in the interview process and I left. And then after she told me, I played the messages for the people that are in there to hear. And I didn't know this. It was an awesome thing. I remember getting someone that they came late for their appointment. And if you're like 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, you're supposed to cancel it. And I said, no, you're fine. Come inside. And I had this little music playing. It's my own cubicle, by the way. And ended up being that she was like, the clerk's like friend or somebody. And she left and said, hey, there's a guy up there that went, he should have canceled my appointment. It was so relaxing talking to him. Like, who is this guy? And I really appreciated that because I felt like I was watching other lawyers and I was like, man, I don't have their skills. I don't have that. But I was like, you know what, just be comfortable in what you have and do what you do good. And that's me talking to people and engaging and finding out how I can help them. And that worked out good for me.
That's another good point. Not every lawyer is the best at everything.
Right.
There are people that are way smarter than I am. There are people that can try a case better than I can. There are people that are nicer to clients than I am. And there are people that are better at every individual piece than I am. But there are things that, I can do if I stack them right that differentiate me from other lawyers. And it sounds like service and connection with people is probably one of your strengths.
Yeah. And, I think what's intimidating about being a lawyer is that you're looking at the finished product of somebody, right? You don't know what they went through. And you try so hard to overstep those, like your particular boundary, and you might fumble. But I know that I can meet someone, talk, and try to figure out stuff. And then the rest of the things that come along with being a lawyer, I think, you can learn. I don't try to do more than I'm equipped to do. And yeah, that works for me.
So the magistrate position, what kind of stuff are you doing there?
Yeah, so we're the front line, the first interaction, a defendant has with the system. And I remember, like, getting murder cases that come before you, and you have to, like, obviously find probable cause to charge that person, but you're getting things that you're like, man, I can't believe this happens in Charlotte. And you're seeing people that are at their worst, people that are getting involuntary committed. You're just seeing stuff. I mean, you're there. It's almost like night court because it's 24 hours, right? And there's 3 shifts. And our shift was a second shift. And we're getting stuff that's like the courthouse is about to close. And then it's just wild stuff. Like it's a whole other, but I really appreciated the other staff that was there that kind of like, hey, look, you want to watch out for this, watch out for that. Also, I thought it was interesting to read the interaction that officers had with magistrate. They walk into your courtroom, they're like, Your Honor. And I wasn't used to being called these little names. And I was like, wow, this is kind of like wild, So it was very humbling. And, at the same time, you realize that there's a lot of power you have. It was just something that I really appreciated. Like I remember, if it snowed or, they'll come get you. And I was like, man, this is wild. So for me, it was more or less like I didn't realize these little things come along with that. But then the responsibility also, I would go to a restaurant and the people are looking at me and I'm like, I don't know if I did something bad to them. And I'm walking out and they were like, hey, you're that magistrate. I was like, oh, someone's going to get mad at me. And they're like, I was like, yeah. I was like, hopefully I dealt with you fair shit. You did. I was like, ooh, so I felt like it was just, the responsibility of being someone that can decide case fairly and, or just a complaint fairly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have a buddy that was a judge for a number of years. And he said, when he was a judge, every joke was the funniest joke. Everybody's laughing at his jokes. And then the second he wasn't a judge anymore, they're not laughing at his jokes so much anymore.
100%. 100%. Like it was, it was, yeah. And people, there's also the other side of it where it got to some people's head. And I remember thinking to myself, like, just the responsibility, you really have to sort of be careful the perception that people have of you.
So you did that for 2-3 years or so, and then eventually you went out, I think it was around 2023, to start your own firm.
Yeah.
What was the impetus? What got you to say, all right, it's time. I want to go practice law on my own. I want to do this.
Yeah, so there's being a magistrate can burn you out a little bit. Mecklenburg County was on the cutting edge of, sort of e-courts and some other stuff, and the responsibility was getting more for us, and I didn't want that. And I felt like I'd watch different attorneys, whether it was at the courthouse or even just in my realm of the magistrate. I say, look, I can do what they do. And I remember talking to my mentor. I said, hey, look, I wouldn't mind going on my own. Like, hey, what are some things that you did? And he said, well, look, why don't you get a business plan? And I was like, okay. And I did. And I remember getting it was like 20 pages. And I put so much effort into it. And I remember being prepared to go out. And the whole idea was being able to sort of buy back your time. I spent all this time going to law school, all this time, like, I was a party guy. And then law school hit, and I got married in law school. Right. So I felt like my wife and I, we always had this, like, it was always a high stress thing where we always had to just study and we never engaged in just being a couple. And I felt like if I can buy back my time, whether through getting clients and getting more cases, I can, spend more time with my family. So that was really the goal, was to be able to sort of, just be able to buy my time back. And I remember it was like the first month or so, I'm on my own. We're here, and I think the pipes, I live in Charlotte, and their system is more reactive than is proactive to maintaining pipes. And sewer literally is flowing into our house. And I was like, my goodness, man. And I remember my wife was like, it was freaking out. But in my mind, I'm thinking, we didn't do anything wrong. I'm going through this. This might be my first case. So, I was looking for opportunities wherever they came. And sure enough, it ended up being my first case. So it was one of those things where it's like, I wanted the opportunity to provide for my family. And what more opportunity than to defend them? So it came that way. And I just, it was that. And then I would go to Boston and, I would go to events. I would look at the listserv. Someone didn't want a case, I would take it. And that case led to someone saying, hey, look, I realized you did wills and trusts. And then, so it was just one after the other. And I wasn't trying to be greedy in terms of wealth. I have a very simple lifestyle. So I'd saved enough money where I knew, hey, I can manage this, that, and that. And, I had opportunities to be home with my daughter. So it wasn't like I was out here and I was trying to fend for food. It was just like, okay, here's my expenses. Here's what I can do to network. Here's the opportunities I have. And I just took advantage of all of them.
So that was good. You spent a lot of time preparing. You got your 20-page business plan.
Yeah.
When you started, you're coming from government. So did you have clients, or did you have a potential set of clients when you opened your doors?
Yeah, I did. I think when I left the courthouse as I'm not a magistrate, but as an estate clerk, there are people that would come there and were still looking for me. Like I remember it was wild. People were still referring people to come to the courthouse to see Clerk Dwayne. And when I left, they were still referring people, hey, go see Lawyer Dwayne. And it was really awesome. One of the best cases I have right now came from there, and I'm humbled by that. So being able to have a presence at the Estates Department allowed for referrals to come. Some cases are wild, but at least they will call me and I'll spend time talking to them. If I can help them, I would. If not, and they will think about me later on and say, hey, you were so helpful to me. So yes. Nothing criminal-wise, but just more for estates and probate.
That's really cool. So you mentioned a minute ago, you started your firm, and then within the first month or so, you had to move out of your house because the pipes backed up or whatever. Yeah. It's hard enough getting a firm off the ground, but then to have to move, and you had kids. It wasn't just you, right?
Yeah. And this, and so a lot of it is just how do you respond to circumstances, right? For me, I troubleshoot. I say, okay, I have a strong face. So I'm like, this is an opportunity to me. That's how I see it. And I can complain about it, but it's still going to be here. So for me, it was like, okay, how do I navigate this circumstance? So obviously we're at the hotel. My wife she's working at a law firm. I'm home with my daughter, and I'm trying to navigate. But that forced me to have someone answer my phone, right, instead of me doing it. And then it also forced me to be able to structure how I gave her naps. I remember being on the consultation, and I can hear her in the background crying, and I'm coughing, trying to hide her crying. So you do whatever you can, but that pressure produces something, right? And I felt like, okay, not every day is going to be like this, right? So this is the worst, and I was able to navigate that. The other one's going to be better. So that was my mindset.
That's true. You get through that, man. It's all downhill after that, right?
Yeah.
Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Life Cycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Life Cycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. So let me ask this too. So you went out, you did work, I guess, as a clerk in the probate area. So that makes sense as to why maybe you would gravitate towards that practice area, but you also do personal injury. I don't know if you thought about, I mean, you were a magistrate, that's sort of criminal type stuff. How did you decide which practice areas you wanted to focus on for your firm?
Yeah, so my mentor does personal injury, Eldon Goodhue in Topsfield. That's where my office is at too. And I remember thinking about his lifestyle. You know, I would go and look at lawyers. I was a troublemaker back then too. So when I wanted to go be a lawyer, I would like reach out to my old lawyers that helped me out. I had to make sure I didn't owe money first. And I was like, hey, you know, can I come shadow you? And like, yeah, you can shadow me. But I liked how he was operating his firm. I liked his free time. It's okay, you know, what do you do? And he's like, you know, I do this, and you lay it out to me. But ironically, he was also the one that encouraged me to go to law school. But I was a client of his for an auto accident, and I was asking him questions to try to get more value for my case. And I was probably in my 20s. And he's like, you know, you should think about going to law school. And I would give him all these excuses as to why I couldn't do it. And then when he chopped them down, I was like, okay. So it was the same mentality I had as to like, hey, is this hard being, you know, a personal injury attorney? He's like, no, you just got to do this, that. And, you know, I literally just took his advice, did everything he told me to do. And it was cool. You know, the way I see it too is that when I do wills and trusts, I'm making friends, and they'll come back and ask you for stuff because you've done, you know, their will or the trust, whatever like that. And then when they find out you do other areas, especially if you do a good job for them, they'll trust you. So these were all warm transfers to me. So I knew I wanted to do personal injury because the lifestyle that he kind of had, and then tweaked it with my own.
So just based on your work in the clerk's office, magistrate,
Well,
obviously you work well with people and you leave a good impression. Do you have a way that you stay in touch with your clients now so that they will keep coming back and referring people to you?
Yeah. And I should probably say one of the reasons why, you know, I even ended up in probate was, you know, when I was 24, my sister passed away from lupus, and I had to go to the courthouse and sort of like navigate probate and guardianship. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is dreadful. I remember saying, if I can get through this, I'll always keep this desire to be a lawyer in my forefront. And then when he kind of watered that seed with the personal injury, to me, it became clear I'll do that and probate, you know. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to do what those clerks I met when I was going through that process with my sister. They were so friendly to me. I told myself, you know what, I want to be able to be like that when they come either to when I was a clerk or even when I meet clients. I'm always trying to sort of like just talk to them as a human being, just engage them in, you know, and that sort of disarms them in terms of just being able to connect. And they always feel like we had a genuine connection, which makes them even call me for unrelated things to law. And that, again, that creates a referral for me because they're like, now I'm a friend as opposed to being some lawyer. So, yeah.
I mean, as somebody who believes in relationships and the power of relationships, I try to maintain as many as I can, but it gets hard, man. There's only so much time in a day. So how do you manage it all, especially between Charlotte and Boston? You're juggling a lot there. So how do you really, I guess, make your days, make them efficient, be able to get through this and really connect with people and do the things you got to do every day with your family and working?
That's it. My family becomes sort of like my guardrails. You know, you get to a point where you feel like things are comfortable and you can only manage so much calls and so many things in a day. And yeah, I use my family as a boundary. Like I have a strict regimen in terms of, you know, when I try to go to bed, I go to the gym. I try to go to gyms that are near my daughter's school, so there's no excuse for me not to work out. I try to allocate certain times where I can take wild phone calls, you know, and then if I got to pick them up, I lock off early. So I know that between these set times, I have an open schedule. Other than that, it's family time. But there are times where, you know what it's like to be a lawyer. So there are times where, because you work for yourself, you can push those boundaries. So that's a part of, like, you know, having boundaries, that's good. But then when you're kind of flexible and your own boss, you can spend hours and hours. So I try to remind myself, hey, look, if you don't have enough for yourself, you don't have enough for them. My family becomes sort of like what helps me to sort of navigate these things. Whereas when I block off my time, when I want to, find a reason to go on a trip, that's how I do it with my family.
Speaking of time, I saw one of your posts. You recently won a trial. I think you said it's your first win. And I know trials can suck all the time out of you. So number one, how did it feel to win that trial? And then, how do you, again, sort of balance the guardrails that you've set up?
I felt like I was sort of like, okay, I can do that. I'm like other guys or ladies that do it. And it felt like, okay, great. I got that one out of the way. I think the hardest part about that was just knowing whether you could do it or not. And just being able to do it, and get through it and be successful, it does a lot for your confidence. The other part of that is, it is time consuming when you're solo or, you can't have probably with certain things for you. And I think being over prepared was awesome, but I also realized how time consuming it can be, right? So you start to get ideas as to, if I were to do this again, what are ways you can maximize some of the stuff right here? So it was a win-win scenario for me, Obviously, it might have been a 2-day. I think it was a day or two. But, it was a great experience. I felt good just getting that out the way,
And prepare for a trial. You realize there's always more you can do. Always. Yeah. You can always do a little bit more to prepare. And sometimes it's hard to say, all right, this is it. So, well, congrats on that. That's awesome. So does it make you want to do more?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think part of being a lawyer, sometimes you think you're an imposter. And I think you look for those opportunities to validate yourself, right? And I try to enjoy the process. And I love competing. I love the idea of like winning, right? So, I think I would love to do more just to be able, especially when you have a good case, when you know the facts are on your side. In this scenario, you're dealing with a dishonest defendant or dishonest, party. So it felt like it was a better win for me. But I would love to do more.
Are you a true solo, or do you have help?
Yeah. So I mentioned I just had a part-time person. I have a 1099 employee, 2 paralegals that do work. So, and that's the hardest part too, is delegating those tasks, right? Where you feel comfortable giving up your little baby here you've been working on for so long. But I do have help. And I think what I do is I try to give the administrative stuff to them and then allow me to work on the things that I really want to just excel at certain parts of the law. But I do have help.
And so let's talk about your 2 practice areas again. So probate, estate, and personal injury. Those are 2 very, very different practice areas.
Right.
Very different systems. All of it, the way it works, very different. How do you manage those 2 very different practice areas?
Yeah.
Do you spend more time on one versus the other, or are they sort of about equal?
I think I have more probate cases. I look at the probate cases as like turn on the lights, like they pay for the light bills, and then the PI ones are like home runs. But I think the PI ones are the ones that it's pre-litigation, right? So that it's a demand letter, medical records, that kind of stuff. It's when you get into like deep litigation that it becomes more time consuming. I think with the probate cases, it's more administrative stuff, right? Until you have to do something that's wild, but it's not that hard. I consider it to be like law school. You're handling 2 subjects, and once you get the civ pro part of it, it's the same. Everything else is just learning law, so it isn't as hard as people think it is. I remember talking to one of my when I first went out on my own, I had to reach out to different people that help you with new firms. And this lady was like, why do you want to do that? And she was just telling me these things. And I can tell that for her, she couldn't understand that. My mentor was like, this is a great idea because people always die. And you can always have, and accidents happen. So, for me, it was natural because of the probate part, my sister, and then my experience with other attorneys that helped me. And I think just for me alone, accidents happen a lot in Boston. They happen sometimes here a lot in North Carolina, but people always pass away. And people always need some kind of probate. So for me, it was just natural.
So let's talk about marketing, business development, lead gen. Obviously, we talked about your relationships and how you do that stuff. Is there anything else you do? How do you go out to develop clients And how do you split that? We're talking a little bit about splitting the time in terms of working the probate versus personal injury. But how do you go about marketing, and where do you invest more of your marketing time and money and budget on the two practice areas?
Yeah, so the probate stuff comes from my interaction with the clerk's office, the co-chair for the estate planning and the probate committee in Mecklenburg County. So whenever I have events there, I'll post them. As it relates to like the PI stuff, I don't have big settlements I can post, right? But what I try to post is an experience I might have with a client or something like that I know people can resonate with. For marketing, I found it natural. It's if you're transparent and vulnerable, people are going to react to that. And I think for me, I get more interaction when I'm telling someone a vulnerable side of me as opposed to telling them something that I try to impress them with. I think that part really helps in terms of getting interactions and engagements from marketing. The events I do, I'm very social, so I try to go to these like major bar events or any annual events that happen, and that allows me to stay connected to other lawyers. And I post that experience, and people that didn't know I was a lawyer see that post. People didn't know, I'm a part of that community, see that post, and it sort of generates referrals. My first one came for estate planning that way. So I just try to take what's organic within my realm and share it in a sincere way that I think people can either get one or two gems from. And it helps me either them referring me to someone that they know because they say, hey, this guy's pretty nice, you can trust him. Or it validates me that, hey, this guy's active. That's how I met Chris Service and other folks.
So I discovered you or found you on LinkedIn. So obviously you're there. Are you on other social platforms? Do you utilize those? Do you have any traction on those?
Yeah, I tried Instagram. I had some guy do a lot of my posts, and there's some things I can probably do, but for the most part, it's really LinkedIn and Facebook. I have my own Facebook page, but I'm still not comfortable posting certain things on my business website or personal one. So it's weird. I only operate within LinkedIn and Facebook, really. That's it.
Yeah, I've got some other pages that like this podcast and thing gets posted to, but I'm really only active on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And each platform I found, each platform's different. And like I tried at some point to do some Instagram, and I just don't understand it, and I just don't feel like learning it.
What do you call it?
I feel like it's a whole different set of rules, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you also like look at what other people are posting, right? And depending on what you're trying to do, you'll find like some things work, some things don't work. So yeah. 100%.
Okay, so you've been at your firm, I guess, about 3 years or so now.
I'm going my 4th year.
So looking back, what have you learned so far, and how maybe has it changed? What were the challenges early on, and maybe how have those changed over the years?
Well, I certainly learned that doing this is possible. I think when you hadn't found success passing a bar, I think it can create, at least for me, it did, the idea that you won't find success, and maybe it's the Harvard guys, Princeton guys that get it, right? So being able to come out here and to still feed my family has, at least for me, I think it's Earl Nightingale. He has a quote that says, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, right? And that idea of progressive is like, it's moving towards something. And I always love that because sometimes you compare your journey with someone else's finished product. So for me, being able to be out here, being able to feed my family, that's, for me, is successful. What I've learned from it is that, and I said it before to you, the whole idea of being humble in the space has been really helpful. I think people can relate to you more, they can teach you more, you can learn more. I think lawyers are looked at, you watch Suits, so you see Harvey Specter or some other guys, you think, that's how it has to be, and that's not you. And I think for me, being able to be, I'm very, I'm competitive. But in terms of learning, I think being able to be humble and be willing to learn and, just teachable has been the best thing for me. People will take you under their wings. They'll let you know things that they wouldn't tell other people because you're eager to learn and you're not coming out there with an arrogant attitude.
Love that. So, okay. So looking back, we're going to flip the question a little bit.
Sure.
Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to when you started, is there anything you said, all right, I should have done this differently, or maybe I should have done this sooner, or maybe shouldn't have done that thing? Are there any lessons maybe for people out there that are thinking about starting or getting started that, everybody on some level needs to make their own mistakes and whatnot, stub their own toes, but, hopefully we can all learn from each other. So is there anything you would tell your own self 3 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, so I had a goal and I was working towards that goal. And I wish when I was going through the dark seasons, I would say, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I didn't do that. I think people abandon some of their goals because it doesn't look like it's happening, right? So, besides getting mentors, besides having a business plan, is being able to remind yourself, at least for me, it's going to be okay. I think people take chances and do some things because they feel like it's not going to be okay. And if I can go back, I would tell myself to enjoy the process. I think there were times where I could have really enjoyed law school more if I knew in the end I was going to be a lawyer instead of being so uptight and stressed. I tell my wife this too. I said, look, let's enjoy these seasons that we're in. I know it might seem kind of strange as moving parts, but let's enjoy it, And I think if I can go back and tell myself one thing, it will be enjoy, work hard, but enjoy it. I was a party animal. I think I gave up some of those things, and rightfully so. But I took on this attitude of being so serious that I didn't enjoy certain things. And I feel like if I can just go back and say, hey, man, enjoy it, I'll probably have some other stories to tell you.
So what tips do you have for me and others on how to just enjoy the process now, not get too caught up in where we are, where we're going?
Well, yeah, I mean, so our profession is, we're high in, I think, alcoholism, some other things, right? So you want to be able to enjoy it, right? You want to be able to, we take on so many different, just secondary trauma, just from listening to other clients, right? So if we're not taking the time to enjoy it, we're going to really be stuck in this paradigm or this refractory period of, man, it's always something negative or something I got to deal with. So you got to find time to really enjoy it, or else you're going to get burnt out. And for me, I work out, I do these things that I try to find a silver lining in all my cases.
And I'm with you. I exercise every day. It's every day. And it's been over 3 years. I have not missed a day. Yeah. And I do all sorts of different things. But for me, that is therapy. If I did not do that, there have been some times where I didn't. And my mental state goes down. So have you always exercised, or is that something that you said, all right, this works for me?
Yeah. I played football, and I think I learned structure from, our school. And I took that I was a personal trainer, and I remember just how I felt after a workout. And I think in law school, when I was trying to structure how I studied, I made sure I was taking breaks and working out. And then I said, hey, look, how much more important is that? You're dealing with more stressful things now. So I don't miss it. I might take off days here, but it's consistently helped me to sort of structure my day. I love it when I can go twice a day, especially as I'm getting older and you're not able to be as agile. So yeah, I always try. It's just in me to do that.
2 a days. You're going back to football.
Right. And it's it's a sloppy too. I'm not putting in an hour and a half and doing some wild stuff, but I know that my clarity is just I hate checking emails early in the morning, and I try to do the first thing, push-ups, and then I go to the gym, go for a jog, and then come back again. Especially as you're getting more comfortable, and you can buy a steak dinner here, do something there. You're like, okay, now I got to make sure I'm getting to the gym because I'm putting on some weight, So yeah.
That's right, man. That's a constant battle there. All right, so again, you've had some, I think, really cool journey about how you've worked hard. You don't just sit around. You go make things happen. Both in law school, after law school, as you started your firm. As you look forward, what's your vision? Where do you want the firm to go? Where do you want your life to go? Your practice? What are you working towards?
Yeah. So I tell my wife I don't think I'm a lawyer. I think I'm just somebody that likes challenges of certain things. So I would love to be able to expand where I can have more time to pursue something new. I love where we're heading in terms of being able to sort of you see what happens at the courthouse with people that go through the probate process. I think people can avoid that. So I would love to do more seminars where you're educating folks on that. In terms of expanding, I have no desire to be a huge firm where I'm making a lot of money like that. I think sometimes for me, at least for me personally, I don't need to do all that. So I want to get to a point where I'm comfortable and do more things like you're doing. You know, I love to have a podcast where I'm talking to people and getting some stuff from them that can be helpful to someone that's just starting. You know, so I wouldn't mind teaching, but you know, just being able to get to a point where you have more time to do things you like to do. For me, that's either spending time with family, teaching, you know, gym. But yeah, if I can expand, it won't be to a point where it's about getting more wealth. Granted, it's helpful, but I don't want that to be I want to make an impact.
So maybe I shouldn't ask this question, but you're from Boston. You still go up there. Do you think you'll end up back there? I mean, I know you got kids in school. It's hard to move them probably.
Yeah, my wife doesn't want to live there. I love traveling there, and you know, the winters are pretty kind of cool depending on where you go. The food's awesome, but I get a really good mixture of being able to go there, see family, and leave. Right, see clients and leave. I love Carolina. The weather here is cool. I got a garden I'm growing. So no, I wouldn't go back to Boston long term. Not that I would love to, but I think where I'm at in Carolina has been really a blessing to me.
You know, I almost moved to Charlotte after law school. I had a job lined up and everything, but ended up not. That's a story that I'll tell you offline.
All right.
But yeah, Charlotte's a pretty cool town. The thing I remember about it, for people who haven't been there, you're driving down the street and it's called, you know, Smith Street, and you cross the street and then all of a sudden the name changes because the way it'll turn is super confusing to get around. I don't know I assume it's still that way.
Yeah, you know, coming from Boston, I got used to anything crazy down here because Boston's a whole other beast. But yeah, it is like that. What freaked me out the most about being in Carolina was there's no sidewalks in certain areas. Like, I'm used to sidewalks in Boston, so I remember thinking, like, where's the sidewalks? But yeah, you find that there is that sort of like change of name, and you can, you know, if you're not GPSing, you can get lost. But after a while of doing it, you kind of figure out what's what.
So we've talked about this a little bit. You've given some advice, but for people out there, you know, let's end it with this. You know, what advice would you give to people out there that are thinking about starting their firm, but they're unsure, they're not sure they can do it? You know, any advice you give them?
Yeah, I mean, first know that you really want to do this, right? Like, a lot of people say, I want to be a lawyer. And if you're, you know, in undergrad thinking about it, go shadow some lawyers that you might want to be like and see what they do. When you get into the idea of, like, you know, okay, I'm in law school now, I'm looking to, you know, maybe go work for the government or whatever like that on my own. Like, get mentors, see what their lifestyle is like. If that's what you're going to do, write it down. You know, I used to write down my goals, and I'll read them to myself at nighttime in the morning, and I'll visualize what it's like to be that way. And I'm surprised those things come to pass. But mentors have been helpful for me. Writing down my goals have been helpful. And obviously, like, shadowing, going to places where you see yourself or you think you're going to be there. So that's been helpful to me.
That's great, man. We'll end it with that. I would sum it up by saying, know what you want and go make it happen.
100%.
It is not going to happen to you. You got to go make it happen. Do what Dwayne did. So, Dwayne, thanks for coming on, man. It's been real fun. It's been cool to hear your story. For people out there that want to get in touch with you, maybe they need some help in probate or they've got a personal injury case. Yeah. What's the best way to find you?
Find me at, so it's PennantLawOffices.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Pennant Law, Dwayne Pennant. You know, so yeah.
And where can they find you if you're out and about? And where do you like to hang out in Boston and Charlotte?
Honestly, so in Boston, you go to any good Chinese restaurant, you might see me there because I'm a foodie. But in terms of Boston, always at a gym. I'm at gym. I'll do some Courthouse events, but really, I'm just a regular guy, man. I was at the gym, Planet Fitness, and some guy saw me. He's like, hey, man, I saw you on television. You were, you know, because he saw an old whatever, and it was so cool. It was so cool. I was like, and he's like, you always work out here? And I was like, man, I'm flattered. So, yeah, I'm just a regular guy. They might find me in a food store, or something like that. So, say hi.
That's cool. That's cool. All right, Dwayne, man, I enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.